All right, welcome everybody around the world. Sorry, here's drawing me nuts. Anyways, welcome to everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. I'm gonna try and knock this video out very quickly in like 10 minutes or less. I'm on a time restraint. This video is very important. I have made a video talking about this before, but try to always refine things better, make it more neat and concise. So that's what we're doing here today. So this is related to the notion in both Judaism and Christianity that there will be a divine week. God's divine week, just like with Genesis, he created for 6 days and God rested on the seventh. And many people in Judaism and Christianity for thousands of years have believed that there would likewise be another divine week, 6,000 years for man, followed by this millennial Sabbath, this 1,000-year Sabbath. And Judaism and Christianity both believe pretty commonly that God makes himself, he manifests himself in whatever way he will with the Messiah at the end of days judgment at the dawn of this seventh millennia. So that means that it would be important to ascertain where we are in terms of 6,000 years, which I have done as a separate issue, which I have done in chapter 1 of my book. It's available on Amazon. Every number is biblically supplied. All the verses are there on the pages, the math breakdown step by step for you. It's undeniable proof. I've got a video where I even read this chapter. If you're interested, you can watch the video for free on my channel. But anyways, the point is whether I'm right or not, I believe I am, but whether I'm right or not about the Bible proves we're in year 6,000 now. My point is for this video, is that it's common belief that there would be 6,000 years to man. Okay, whether we're in year 6,000 or not, that's a separate argument for another time that takes longer to go over. So my point is that there's supposedly 6,000 years to man, followed by the arrival of God with Messiah, and then we have 1,000 years where the earth is reshaped, reformed, whatever, it goes into rest, it lays fallow, and all of that. Okay, that's what everybody pretty much accepts. So since we're all on the same page here, we all believe the same type of thing. Okay, I have something very important to read here. So like I said, I'm not here. I don't have time to sit here and get into all the details again, but all 6,000 years are mapped out in chapter 1 of my book here, undeniably. Okay, all the way from Adam, who is the first created human, and then Seth, who is the first mortal born from man and woman who begat the biblical lineage, all the way from there to the fall of the first temple at the hands of Babylon. Okay, now Judaism, all I will briefly say is they don't believe we're in the year 6,000 currently. They believe there's another 200 or something years left. This is because they place the timing of that Babylonian invasion and the fall of the temple in like 420 BC. I've read all the reasonings why they believe that it should be that way, but I don't get with that. That theory, even though it's widely held across Judaism, basically tries to say that historians have all of the dating wrong. But there is good evidence, even archaeological evidence, when they did, when they looked into the geological strata of the rocks, they found a burned layer that corresponded to 586, 587 BC roughly. So not 100 and something years different. But anyways, putting all petty arguments aside, Judaism believes we're a couple hundred years away. I don't believe their theory, right? Nor will I ever. Plus, despite that, chapter 1 here proves that it has been 6,000 years. There is no wiggle room because I started from 0, supplying verses for every digit, every number, going all the way up from 0. And we go all the way up until the Babylonian invasion. That much period of time, whatever it is, like 3,500-ish years, that's all meticulously plotted out by the Bible. Also all there in chapter 1. And then from there, because that was in 587 or 586, it's in the book, you just marry that with modern history because we know we're in the year 2024 and 587 is 587. So when you do the simple maths, it totals to 6,000 for the year 2024. Okay, so whether Judaism wants to believe that or not, that's up to them. They can go read chapter 1 and tell me what they think. But for Christians, Christians don't have that problem thinking that the temple fell in 420 instead of 580 something, right? So for fellow Christians here, as a Christian, two fellow Christians, I'm going to read from Hebrews and a few other verses here because it's going to show something quite astounding. It helps verify that there is very well, based on what's said, this divine week, and that there'll be 6,000 years to mortal man, followed by this 1,000 year of Sabbath rest and all that. So I'll also mention, in case I forget, this also plays into other prophecies, which I cover in the book, because this book is about, it's got more of them, but it's about 7 key scriptural prophecies that prove when the end of days will be. So it ties into some of those prophecies as well, minor ones such as Hosea, I think it's 6:2 or 6:3, the famous prophecy after 2 days, which is after 2,000 years, we will be healed. That plays into one or two other prophecies that I mentioned in the book, totally separate, different prophecies. But this all comes together, and it also ties into the video I made the other day about 2,000 years, 2 watches. So this all comes together because when Jesus had died, it had been, what was it? It was, sorry, when Jesus was baptized, it had been 4,000 years. And after his baptism, there's a final 2,000 years. So I prove that in all the other videos and in the book. I don't have time to get into all that now. But my point is that in the week of 6,000 years, you have 4 days, that's 4,000. Then the final, then the next 2 days, which would be the next 2,000, that totals 6,000. Okay, so like I said, the Bible and history show that we're in the year 6,000 now. Mathematically, that's proven. So if we're in the year 6,000 now, all these other correlated prophecies are even more important and relevant. So if we go and look at what it says here, right, there's a famous verse in the Old Testament in Psalm 95, I think it is, talking about they shall not enter into my rest. This was the disobedient ones who built the golden calf and who disobeyed God. They wouldn't enter into his rest. Okay, this is also quoted in Hebrews 3 and referenced in Hebrews 3 and Hebrews 4. So let's read the verse real quick. We've only got 5 verses to read about that. So in Hebrews 3:6, and Christ as a son over his house, whose house are we, if the boldness and the rejoicing of the hope unto the end we hold fast. Now I only included that because it's talking about rejoicing of the hope unto the end. That's a reference to the end. The end is when the time for man ends and God arrives with Messiah in the judgment day, right? So it's talking about the end, and we should have rejoicing and hope for this end. So that's unrelated. It's related, but unrelated to what I'm talking about here today. But it's important, so I want to mention it. Next, Hebrews 3:11, which is just verses later. It says, so I swear in my anger, this is referencing Psalm 95. So I swear in my anger, if they shall enter into my rest. Now, the problem with translations of the Bible is you should always go and check what the original translation says and what the original language text says. So even though I always use the original translation, I often check the original languages to verify. So where it says here, if they shall enter into my rest, this has got to do with how, when put over into English, it changes the form, structure, meaning of words. Looking in the original language, what the verse actually says is, they will not enter into my rest, which is what Psalm 95 says and the other various verses say, such as Hebrews 4. It's clearly saying, they will not enter into my rest. This is a reference to the disobedient ones who don't deserve to enter into his rest, such as the ones who disobeyed him, built the gold calf and all that. And likewise, throughout time, anybody else who likewise disobeys him, you will not get to enter into his rest. Now, if you search the Bible like I did for the terms my rest, in quotes, i.e. God saying my rest, and if you do a search for enter and rest, not together, but in that one search, enter and rest, so they have to occur together in the scripture. I've done that. There's not many results, probably about 20 results at most altogether. A very quick study, micro study to do. You'll see it doesn't mention it many places whatsoever. In fact, most or all of the places where it talks about my rest, God's rest, or enter and rest, are the verses I'm about to read. Okay, Psalm 95 that I referenced, and Hebrews 3 and Hebrews 4. I think there's only a couple others. And what it shows concretely is that it's only talking about one lump thing. It's talking about one thing. This is entering into God's rest. It's not a term widely applied to other things that occurs many other places. It's just one subject, one thing, one matter. Okay? And entering into his rest means what? Well, if you look at the scripture, And if we do a search on the word rest by itself, rest, you get a lot of verses. And what we learn is that in the seventh day, God did rest, in the seventh day of creation. And when we look at the Sabbath day itself, the Sabbath day law and all of that, all the verses that talk about that is talking about rest on the Sabbath day. So we know that God rests on the Sabbath day. We know from Psalm 90 that a day with God is like 1,000 years, which ties into a lot of other important prophecies, like from my book and my videos. Everybody knows that verse, Judaism, Christianity, anyways, right? So if God rests in the seventh day, if God rests therefore in the seventh millennia, okay, this just helps verify the framework of the ideology that I'm talking about. We have met God created for 6 days, rested on the seventh. Then mortal man exists for 6 days, and then those who are worthy at the end of it will rest with God in the seventh. That's the pattern. Very logical, right? I don't think anybody would argue that. It makes perfect sense. So entering into his rest, the his being God, means when does God rest? He rests on the seventh. So if you're going to enter into his rest and not your rest, not a weekly rest, but in God's rest, that means you have to enter into his rest on the seventh day. So when is the next seventh day? Well, that's when taking in the divine week of 7,000 years comes into account. So all of this is logical reasoning. Okay, so if you're going to enter his rest, that means you're going to be, you need to be worthy enough to be redeemed at the end of day's judgment so that you could enter into resting with God in that seventh millennia. Okay? Very sensible, logical, reasonable point. Okay? So, and if you're disobedient, you don't get to, right? So in Hebrews 3:11, so I swear in my anger, if they shall enter into my rest. And that's why I mentioned Hebrews 3:6 first, because it talked about if the boldness and rejoicing of the hope unto the end we hold fast, is a reference to we're having rejoicing, hope, this faith and belief in the end, and we're going to strive for it to be worthy for the judgment that occurs at the end, if we're alive at that time, right? A few verses later is where it says, so I swear in my anger, they will not enter into my rest, the disobedient ones. So we can see that it's connecting the two topics here, rest and end of days. Further verifies the claim I'm trying to make. Anyways, here are the important verses. Hebrews 3:18. And to whom did he swear that they shall not enter into his rest except to those who did not believe? And we see that they were not able to enter in because of unbelief, right? So you're believing, you're worthy, you get to enter the rest. If you're unbelieving, you're unworthy, unrighteous, you don't get to enter into the rest. And Hebrews 4, this is where it gets very interesting. Verses 3-11. So it says, for we do enter into the rest. And what rest again? This is God's rest on the seventh day. Okay. We who did believe, as he said, so I swear in my anger, if they shall not enter into my rest. Again, quoting Psalm 95. And yet, Paul says, and yet the works were done from the foundation of the world. For he spake in a certain place concerning the seventh day thus, and God did rest in the seventh day from all his works. This is a seventh day unto God. A day unto God is 1,000 years. So this is a direct reference to the seventh day, to the divine seventh day, which is the seventh millennia, and it's the one in which God rests. This is highlighting that at the end of the days, this is the rest that it's talking about, right? So, for he spake in a certain place concerning the seventh day thus, and God did rest in the seventh day from all his works. And in this place again, they shall not enter into my rest. So what Paul is doing here is he's directly saying that just like when God rested on the seventh day of creation, it is reflected in this future end time, which will introduce this next period of seventh day Sabbath rest on the divine week with God, right? That's why it says, and in this place again, they shall not enter into my rest. It's showing that disobedient don't enter into that rest, which is in the seventh millennia at the end of days. Going on, since then it remaineth for certain to enter into it, that would be the worthy, and those who did first hear good news entered not in because of unbelief. These were those who disobeyed and built the golden calf and so forth. Again, God does limit a certain day. This would be the final day, the end of day when God and Messiah arrive. Again, he does limit a certain day, today, in David saying after so long a time, meaning referencing at the end of days, as it has been said, today, if his voice you may hear, you may not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, he would not concerning another day have spoken after these things. what Paul is trying to make a point with here is that it's talking about the rest at the end of days, simply speaking. Now, final verse, there does remain then a sabbatic rest to the people of God, for he who did enter into his rest. Let me just interject there. If you're Jewish and you have to keep the Jewish law, then keeping the Sabbath is part of that law. There's no question that it would ever go or anything. They're bound to it until God, changes the earth and the heavens, right? And maybe it wouldn't even change then, right? But it says there does remain then a sabbatic rest to the people of God. There would be no question that a sabbatic rest would remain to the Jews. This is obviously this is directly implying the Gentiles, the relation of Gentiles to Jews here, right? To the whole program. Right. So what he's pointing out here is that there's a sabbatic rest to the people of God. This doesn't exclude Jews and Judaism. It's just talking about referencing Gentiles, right? A sabbatic rest to the people of God. Now, Gentiles are not supposed to keep the Jewish Sabbath. Gentiles don't keep Sabbath. God says in the Bible, the Sabbath is between him and the people of Israel who partook in the Exodus and their direct biological descendants. Okay, the Gentiles are not applicable to that. We didn't go on an exodus out of Egypt. We weren't enslaved in Egypt and all of that there, right? This is common education. Not everybody knows it, right? But Gentiles are not supposed to keep the Jewish law. There's basic elements like be good, don't steal, this and that there. Obviously, those are just basic elements of righteousness. But ritualistic things or uncommon things such as Sabbath keeping, that's Jewish law. The Sabbath was like the binding seal in the Jewish law for the Jews, right? Gentiles don't keep the rituals, the festivals, the Jewish laws, the Sabbath. We don't keep any of those things. We're not supposed to. That's what the book of Acts says, right? So why is Paul saying that a sabbatic rest remains for the people of God? It says, for he who did enter into his rest, he also rested from his works, as God did from his own. So this is a direct this is directly pointing towards, like I said, you have 6,000 years for man to be mortal in, for mortal mankind to exist in. The curse to Adam and all mortal mankind was that they will work and toil by the sweat of their brow under the sun all their mortal days. Okay, so God creates for 6 and rests on 7. Then man exists as mortals in the cursed state, working and toiling for 6 days, and then we're commanded to be worthy to join the rest on the 7th. Makes perfect sense. So when Paul is saying there does remain then a sabbatic rest to the people of God, even to the Gentiles, for he who, and for everybody, for he who did enter into God's rest, he, the individual, also rested from his works, from his mortal works, as God from his own. May we be diligent then to enter into that rest, that no one in the same example of the unbelief may fall. So all of this, when you wrap it all together, Paul is stressing that, and Paul was a Jew who kept the Sabbath, right? As they argue in Acts, right? Jews are supposed to be zealous of the law and keep it. Even Matthew 5:17 says this from Jesus' mouth. Gentiles are not supposed to keep those things, according to Acts 15, Acts 20, 21, I think it is, right? So why is Paul saying this? He's saying this because he's saying that despite the Jewish Sabbath being law for Jews and not law for Gentiles, there still remains a sabbatic rest for the people of God, both Jew and Gentile. There is a higher Sabbath day at the end of days in the 7th millennia. Okay? This is God's rest, as he terms it and identifies it here. This is God's rest. Okay? So all of this together shows that after 6,000 years, just like Hosea says, after the final 2,000, we're healed on the 3rd. This will be after the 5th, and then the 6 millennia are done. Then we have at the dawn of the 7th, the arrival of Messiah. This directly ties into the video I made the other day, which is linked to 2 of the chapters in my book, about the 2 different prophecies. One is about the double cup of punishment, a period just under 2,000 years. And then we also have the other prophecy about 2 watches, 2,000 years. All of these things corroborate one another, link and connect to one another, verify one another, even though they're different prophecies from different people at different times, and they all highlight 2024, including, like I showed in chapter 1, the Tanakh itself detailing all the years accounted for from Adam, from Seth, all the way up until the fall of the temple. Sorry, piece of sand in my eye. To the fall of the temple, right? So we are in the year 6,000, according to the Bible. And the 6,000 years coming to an end, 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. So when it hits 6000, it has been 6,000 years. Some people might think, oh, we have to go from 6 to 7. No, that's the 7th millennium, right? So we're at that point now. The 7th millennium will be God's time to rest, perfect time for the earth to rest, for the creation to rest, for mortality to be put to rest. All of this makes perfect sense. Is this a clear-cut statement that the end of days is going to be at the end of 6,000 years? No, it's not a direct, clear statement, but it's heavily implied throughout Hebrews 4 here, okay? And that's why I did these micro-studies on the terms rest, my rest, and enter rest. And when you look at all the other verses, they only edify the claim that I'm trying to make here. Okay, so all these references of rest and God's rest specifically are about a 7th day unto God, which we know is as 1,000 years. Okay, so anyways, that's it for this video. Just get ready, because it could very well happen in 2024 or even in early 2025. And just get ready, reform like we've been commanded to, and just be prepared, so you're not going to be caught by surprise. Make sure you do all your preparation now. The 6th day is the preparation day, so we should be preparing. Anyways, I've got to go. God bless you all. Everybody take care. There's other things I could mention that'll, back this up a little bit more, but I just don't have time for it today. So that's good enough for now. See you all later.